Welcome, today's story is full of drama. Like and subscribe to stay updated. Let's get started.
My name is Logan Carter, and wrestling has been my life for as long as I can remember. It's not just a sport to me, it's a way of life, a discipline, a code. I was an NCAA heavyweight champion back in the day, and now I'm a high school wrestling coach molding young athletes into warriors. But life outside the mat hasn't been as kind to me. A year and a half ago, my world came crashing down when I caught my ex-wife, Denise Morgan, with her college flame, Anthony Green. That moment shattered a 26-year marriage and left me grappling with emotions I didn't know how to handle. I remember the day like it was yesterday. I came home early from practice, hoping to surprise Denise with dinner. Instead, I walked into a scene that made my blood boil. There they were in my living room, laughing like a couple of teenagers. Anthony Green, that smug bastard, had his arm around Denise, and she was leaning into him like she hadn't spent the last 26 years building a life with me. I stood there frozen for a moment, my fists clenched so tight I could feel my nails digging into my palms. "Denise," I said, my voice low and steady but with an edge that could cut steel. She jumped, her face turning pale. Anthony, on the other hand, had the audacity to smirk at me. That smirk, it was like a match to gasoline. "Logan, I can explain," Denise started, but I cut her off. "Explain what?" "That you're screwing around with this clown." I gestured toward Anthony, who was still sitting there like he owned the place, in our house, in our living room. Anthony stood up, puffing out his chest like he was some kind of tough guy. "Listen, Logan, let's not make this ugly," he said, his tone dripping with condescension. That was it. I saw red. All those years of discipline, of control, of being the bigger man evaporated in an instant. I lunged at him, grabbing him by the collar of his stupid designer shirt. He tried to push me off, but he was no match for me. I spent my life wrestling men twice his size. I slammed him against the wall, and he let out a grunt of pain. "You think you can just waltz in here and take what's mine?" I growled, my face inches from his. "You think you're man enough to handle what's mine?" "Logan, stop!" Denise screamed, but I wasn't listening. Anthony swung at me, a wild, untrained punch that I easily dodged. I retaliated with a right hook that connected with his jaw, sending him sprawling to the floor. He tried to get up, but I was on him in an instant, pinning him down like I used to do to my opponents back in my wrestling days. "You stay down," I snarled, my voice shaking with rage. "You stay the hell away from my family." Denise was crying now, begging me to stop, but I wasn't done. I leaned in close to Anthony, my breath hot against his ear. "If I ever see you near her again, I'll break more than just your pride. You understand me?" He nodded, his face pale and bloodied, his eyes wide with fear. I let him go, and he scrambled to his feet, bolting out the door without a backward glance. Denise collapsed onto the couch, sobbing, but I couldn't bring myself to comfort her. The betrayal cut too deep. That was the end of our marriage. The hardest part of all this wasn't losing Denise. It wasn't even the humiliation of catching her with Anthony. No, the hardest part was losing my kids, Ethan and Sophia. My own flesh and blood turned on me. They blamed me for the divorce, me as if I was the one who cheated, as if I was the one who broke our family apart. But they were convinced it was all my fault, and nothing I said could change their minds. It started with Ethan. He came over one night, his face hard, his voice colder than I'd ever heard it. "Dad, you need to fix this," he said, standing in the middle of my living room like he was delivering a verdict. "Mom's not happy, and it's because of you." "Because of me?" I shot back, my voice rising. "You think I'm the one who ruined this family? Your mother was the one who—" "Stop," he interrupted, his hands up like he was shielding himself from my words. "Just stop, Dad. You don't get it. Mom's been miserable for years. You were never there for her. You were always at the gym, at practice with your wrestlers. And when you were home, you were too tired to even talk to her. You think that's what she deserved? A life where she felt invisible." I stared at him, stunned. "Ethan, I worked hard to provide for this family. Wrestling is who I am. Your mother knew that when she married me." "Yeah, well, maybe she thought you'd change," he said, his voice cracking. "Maybe she thought you'd grow up and realize there's more to life than wrestling. But you didn't. And now she's with someone who actually cares about her." That stung more than I wanted to admit. But before I could respond, Sophia chimed in. She'd been quiet up until then, sitting on the couch with her arms crossed. But now she looked at me with tears in her eyes. Dad, you don't get it. Mom wasn't happy. She tried to talk to you, but you never listened. You were always so focused on your career, on your athletes, that you forgot about us. You forgot about her. That's not true, I said, my voice trembling. I loved your mother. I loved all of you. I did everything I could to give you a good life. A good life. Sophia snapped. Dad, you were a high school wrestling coach. You barely made enough to pay the bills. Mom had to pick up extra shifts just to keep us afloat, and you never even noticed. You were too busy living in your own little world. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. So this is about money now? You think I didn't earn enough, so your mother had the right to cheat on me? It's not just about the money, Dad, Ethan said, his voice softer now but no less cutting. It's about you not being there. It's about you not caring enough to make her feel loved. You think Anthony's perfect? Maybe he's not, but at least he pays attention to her. At least he makes her feel like she matters. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own kids siding with Denise and Anthony, defending the man who destroyed our family. I felt a surge of anger, but I bit it back. Well, I said, my voice cold. If your mother's so unhappy with me, then she's free to go. She can marry her Prince Charming and live her perfect little life. Why are you two trying to stop the divorce? Why are you blaming me for something she did? They didn't have an answer for that. Not one that made sense, anyway. But it didn't matter. They'd made up their minds. I was the villain in this story, and nothing I said or did was going to change that. For a while, they cut me out of their lives completely. No calls, no texts, no visits. It was like I didn't exist to them anymore. And Denise? She didn't waste any time moving on. 3 months after the divorce was finalized, she married Anthony. 3 months. It felt like a slap in the face. Like she couldn't wait to erase me from her life. But the betrayal didn't stop with Denise. Oh no, it just kept going, like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. Anthony, that smug, silver-tongued snake, didn't just take my wife. He took my kids, too. Turns out, he's some hotshot businessman with a used car dealership in Bridgeport, and he offered jobs to both Ethan and Sophia. And just like that, they jumped at the chance. My own children working for the man who helped destroy our family. It was like they were all looking at him like some kind of savior. Like his money and his fancy job offers made him a better man than me. I found out about it from Ethan. He called me one evening, his tone casual, like he was just checking in. But I could tell something was off. Hey, Dad, he said. Just wanted to let you know I've got a new job. I'm working at Anthony's dealership. He's got me in sales. It's a good opportunity. I froze, the phone pressed to my ear, my knuckles turning white as I gripped it tighter. You're working for Anthony? I asked, my voice low and dangerous. The same Anthony who broke up our family? That Anthony? Ethan sighed, like I was being unreasonable. Yeah, Dad, that Anthony. Look, I know you don't like him, but he's been good to Mom, and he's giving me a chance to make something of myself. It's a solid job with good pay. You should be happy for me. Happy for you? I snapped. You're working for the man who slept with your mother while we were still married, and you expect me to be happy? Are you kidding me? Dad, it's not like that, he said, his voice rising. You don't get it. Anthony's not the bad guy here, he's just trying to help. And Sophia's working there too, by the way. He offered her a job in the office. She's doing really well. I felt like the ground had been ripped out from under me. Sophia too? My daughter. My little girl. Working for that man? Couldn't believe it. So what? You're both just going to forget everything he did? Forget everything I've done for you? My voice was shaking with anger. I'm your father, Ethan. Not him. Yeah, you're my father. Ethan shot back, his voice bitter. But you weren't exactly winning any Dad of the Year awards, were you? You were always too busy with your wrestling, with your athletes, to care about what was going on at home. Anthony actually cares, Dad. He's there for Mom. And he's there for us. Maybe you should try it sometime. I wanted to scream, to throw the phone against the wall. But I forced myself to stay calm. You think this is about money, don't you? I said, my voice shaking. You think Anthony's some kind of hero because he's got a fancy job and a dealership? Let me tell you something, Ethan. I didn't earn less, no matter what your mother told you. I had a decent salary. And your mother? She worked because she wanted extra money for her clothes and her little luxuries. I provided for this family. I gave you everything I could. Yeah? Well, it wasn't enough, Ethan said coldly. Not for Mom. And not for us. Maybe you should have tried harder. The line went dead after that. I just stood there, staring at the phone, feeling like I'd been sucker punched. My own son, throwing my failures in my face. Siding with the man who'd taken everything from me. And Sophia? She didn't even bother calling to tell me about her new job. I had to hear it from Ethan. It was like they'd both decided I wasn't worth their time anymore. The only silver lining in all of this? I didn't have to pay a single cent of alimony or child support. Denise didn't fight me on it. Probably because she was too busy playing house with Anthony. And the house? That stayed with me. It was my inheritance from my father. The one thing Denise couldn't take away. But even that felt hollow now. Sure, I had the house. But it was empty. No wife. No kids. No laughter. Just me. Alone with my thoughts. And the memories of what used to be. I tried to tell myself it was better this way. At least I didn't have to pretend anymore. At least I didn't have to watch Denise and Anthony flaunt their new life in front of me. But the truth? It hurt. It hurt more than I wanted to admit. My family was gone. And there was nothing I could do to get them back. All I had left was my pride, my house, and the knowledge that I'd done my best. Even if it wasn't enough for them. You might think the story ends here, with me alone in that big empty house, drowning in my regrets and bitterness. But life has a funny way of throwing you a lifeline when you least expect it. For me, that lifeline came in the form of Mark Daniels, one of my former students. Mark wasn't just any student. He was a former NCAA heavyweight champion, just like I was back in the day. The kid had raw talent, discipline, and a fire in his eyes that reminded me of myself at his age. And now, he was making waves in the world of MMA. I remember the day he called me. I was sitting in my living room, staring at the blank TV screen, wondering how my life had come to this. The phone rang, and I almost didn't answer it. But something told me to pick up. Coach Carter. Mark's voice came through, steady and confident. It's Mark Daniels. I need your help. I sat up a little straighter. Mark? What's going on? I just got signed by a major MMA promotion based in Tokyo, he said, and I could hear the excitement in his voice. It's a big break for me, coach. But I don't want to do this alone. I want you to come to Tokyo and train me. You're the best coach I've ever had. And I need you in my corner. I was stunned. Tokyo. MMA. It was a world away from the high school wrestling mats I'd been coaching on for years. Before I could respond, Mark kept going. I've already talked to one of the top MMA gyms out here, he said. They're willing to bring you on as a trainer. They'll pay you well, coach. Really well. And they'll set you up with everything you need. All you have to do is say yes. I leaned back in my chair, my mind racing. Tokyo. A new start. A chance to get away from this city. From the memories of Denise and Anthony. From the betrayal of my kids. It sounded too good to be true. But then again, what did I have to lose? Mark, I said slowly. This is a big ask. I don't know the first thing about MMA. Wrestling, sure. But MMA. That's a whole different beast. That's why I need you, Mark said, his voice earnest. You taught me how to be a fighter, coach. Not just on the mat, but in life. I don't need an MMA expert. I need you. You're the one who knows how to push me, how to get me to dig deep and find that extra gear. Please, coach. I can't do this without you. I sat there for a long moment, the silence stretching between us. My mind flashed back to all the years I'd spent coaching. All the kids I'd trained. All the lives I'd touched. And then I thought about Denise. About Ethan and Sophia. About the empty house and the even emptier future that stretched out in front of me. Finally, I took a deep breath. All right, Mark, I said. I'll do it. I'll come to Tokyo. The relief in his voice was palpable. Thank you, coach. You won't regret this. I promise. I wasn't so sure about that. But for the first time in a long time, I felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this was my chance to start over. To leave the past behind. And focus on something that mattered. Maybe this was my chance to be the man I used to be. The fighter. The champion. The coach who made a difference. A month later, I was on a plane to Tokyo, leaving behind the city that had brought me so much pain. I didn't know what the future held. But for the first time in a long time, I was ready to find out. The night of the fight arrived after 6 grueling weeks of intense training. The air in the arena was electric, thick with anticipation and the roar of the crowd. Mark was stepping into the cage against an elite kickboxer with a reputation for dismantling his opponents. The odds were stacked against him, and everyone, except me and him, thought this was going to be a one-sided beatdown. But I knew better. I'd seen Mark's grit, his determination, his ability to adapt. He wasn't just a fighter. He was a student of the game, and I had poured everything I had into preparing him for this moment. As I stood in Mark's corner, my eyes locked on him. He was calm, focused, ready. I placed my hands on his shoulders and leaned in close. "Listen to me, Mark," I said, my voice steady but firm. "This guy's good, but he's predictable. He's gonna come at you hard. But you've got to stay patient. Feel him out. Look for the openings. And when you see your shot, take it." Mark nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. "I'm ready, coach. Let's do this." The bell rang, and the fight began. The first round was tense. Both fighters circling each other, testing the waters. The opponent was fast, his strikes sharp and precise. He landed a few solid hits on Mark, and I could see the crowd starting to buy into the narrative that this was going to be a quick night. But I wasn't worried. I'd seen this before. Mark was a slow starter, but he was a finisher. When the round ended, Mark came back to the corner, his breathing heavy but controlled. I grabbed his face, forcing him to look at me. "You're doing good, kid," I said. "But I saw something. This guy's got a habit of keeping his elbows high when he's defending. It's good for stopping takedowns, but it leaves his body wide open. Next round, you fake a strike, close the distance, and take him down. Once you've got him on the ground, it's your world. You hear me?" Mark nodded, his eyes narrowing with focus. "Got it, coach. Fake the strike. Close the distance. Take him down." The bell rang for the second round, and Mark stepped out with a new intensity. He faked a jab. Just like I predicted, the opponent raised his elbows to defend. Mark shot in like a bullet, wrapping his arms around the opponent's waist and driving him to the mat. The crowd erupted as Mark quickly transitioned to the opponent's back, locking in a rear naked choke. The opponent struggled, but it was too late. Within 30 seconds, he tapped out. The arena exploded in cheers. The referee raised Mark's hand in victory. I couldn't help but smile as I watched him celebrate, the crowd chanting his name. This was what it was all about. The thrill of the fight, the satisfaction of seeing your hard work pay off. And it wasn't just Mark's victory. It was mine, too. Back in the locker room, Mark was beaming. "Coach, you were right," he said, his voice filled with admiration. "That takedown was all you. I couldn't have done it without you." I clapped him on the shoulder, feeling a swell of pride. "You did the work, kid. I just pointed you in the right direction." The promotion was thrilled with the result, and they handed out bonuses like candy. Mark, true to his word, gave me 10% of his earnings. It was more money than I'd made in years, maybe even ever. And it wasn't just the money. It was the validation. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was back in the game, doing what I was born to do. As I walked out of the arena that night, the weight of the past year and a half felt a little lighter. I was making money, great money, but more than that, I was making a difference. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had a future worth fighting for. The fight didn't just put Mark in the spotlight. It changed everything for me. Overnight, I went from being a washed-up wrestling coach to a sought-after fight tactician. The gym in Tokyo was flooded with new students, some of them established fighters looking to sharpen their skills. Money started rolling in, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was living again. Not just surviving, but thriving. Over the next 2 years, I trained and cornered in 14 fights with different fighters. Each victory added to my reputation, and each paycheck added to my bank account. But it wasn't just about the money. It was about the thrill of the fight, the satisfaction of seeing my strategies play out in the cage. I was back in my element, doing what I loved, and it showed. Mark, of course, was the crown jewel of my stable. He was undefeated, a rising star in the MMA world. But after his 4th fight, his contract with the Tokyo promotion ended. By then, he had caught the attention of one of the biggest promotions in the USA, and they came calling with a lucrative deal. It was a no-brainer. Mark was ready for the big leagues, and so was I. "Coach," Mark said one evening after we wrapped up training, "it's time to go home. I want you with me when I make this jump. We've come this far together, and I'm not about to leave you behind." I nodded, a smile tugging at the corners of my mouth. I was thinking the same thing, kid. It's time to take this show back to the States. Once we got back home, I had a plan. I wasn't going to just coach at someone else's gym. I was going to build my own. Mark was all in, investing a chunk of his earnings to help get it off the ground. I also reached out to some old friends, a nutritionist, a kickboxing coach, and a few others who'd been in the fight game for years. They were eager to join the team, and together we built something special. The gym opened its doors 6 months after we returned, and it didn't take long for word to spread. Fighters from all over the country came to train with us, drawn by my reputation and the success of Mark and the others I coached in Tokyo. We had a stable of 18 elite fighters, each one a force to be reckoned with. The gym was buzzing with energy, the sound of gloves hitting pads, the clang of weights, the fire in every fighter's eyes. One evening, as I stood in the middle of the gym watching my fighters train, Mark walked over and clapped me on the back. "Look at this, coach," he said, a grin spreading across his face. "You built this from the ground up. You should be proud." I looked around, taking it all in. The fighters, the coaches, the state-of-the-art equipment. It was a far cry from the high school wrestling mats I'd left behind. "I am proud," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "But this isn't just me. This is all of us. You, the team, everyone who believed in this dream. We did this together." Mark nodded, his expression serious now. "Yeah, we did. And we're just getting started. Life has a way of coming full circle when you least expect it. Just when I thought I'd reached the peak of my career, something happened that made me realize I was still climbing. It started with a phone call from ESPN. They wanted to feature me on SportsCenter. Me, Logan Carter, the guy who'd been written off as a washed-up wrestling coach. And now, I was about to be on national television. The segment was everything I could have hoped for, and more. They played my entire life story like a highlight reel, my days as an NCAA heavyweight champion, the years I spent coaching at the high school, and now, my rise as the coach of one of the most promising heavyweight prospects in MMA, Mark Daniels. They showed pictures of me in my prime, slamming opponents to the mat, and then cut to footage of me cornering Mark and the rest of our fighters. It was surreal watching my life unfold on screen like that. When the segment ended, my phone blew up. Texts, calls, social media notifications. It was overwhelming, but the one that stuck with me was from Mark. He sent me a simple message. "You deserve this, coach. You've earned it." 3 weeks later, I was in Las Vegas for another fight. This time it was Luis Santiago, one of our middleweights, stepping into the cage for a title shot. Luis had been with us since the beginning, and I'd spent countless hours drilling wrestling techniques with him. He was a beast on the ground, and I knew he had what it took to win. The fight was one-sided from the start. Luis dominated his opponent, taking him down at will and controlling the fight on the ground. When the final bell rang, there was no doubt in anyone's mind. Luis Santiago was the new middleweight champion. As the referee raised Luis's hand, the crowd erupted in cheers. But what happened next took my breath away. Luis grabbed the mic and looked straight into the camera. "I want to thank my team, my family, and everyone who believed in me," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "But there's one person who made this possible, Coach Logan Carter. This belt is as much his as it is mine. He taught me everything I know about wrestling, about fighting, about never giving up. This is for you, coach." Before I could process what was happening, Luis walked over to me, pulled the championship belt off his waist, and draped it over my shoulders. The crowd went wild, and I felt a lump rise in my throat. I hadn't expected this. Not in a million years. "Luis," I said, my voice cracking, "this is your moment, kid. You earned this." He shook his head, a grin spreading across his face. "Nah, coach. We earned this together." The image of me standing there, the belt on my shoulders, made the front page of the Las Vegas newspapers the next day. Coach Logan Carter, the man behind the champions. That was the headline. It was surreal seeing my face on the cover, the belt gleaming in the spotlight. As I sat in my hotel room that morning, staring at the newspaper, I couldn't help but reflect on how far I'd come, from the betrayal and heartbreak of my past, to this moment, standing at the pinnacle of my career. Felt like a dream, but it wasn't just about me. It was about the fighters I trained, the team I built, and the legacy we were creating together. Mark called me later that day, his voice filled with pride. Coach, you're everywhere. Front page. Social media. Everywhere. How does it feel? I leaned back in my chair, a smile tugging at my lips. It feels like we're just getting started, kid. Just getting started. Life had been good. No, great. I was riding high on the success of my fighters, the gym, and the recognition that had finally come my way. But just when I thought I'd left the past behind, it came crashing back into my life. With a single phone call. It was Ethan, my son. The same Ethan who hadn't spoken to me in years. Who had chosen to side with Denise and Anthony over me. The same Ethan who had cut me out of his life as if I were nothing more than a stranger. When I saw his name flash on my phone, I hesitated. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail and pretend I hadn't seen it. But another part of me, the part that still cared, despite everything, made me pick up. Ethan? I said, my voice neutral, guarded. This is a surprise. There was a pause on the other end, like he wasn't sure how to start. Hey, Dad, he finally said. I wanted to let you know that I got married, and I have 2 kids now, a boy and a girl. I blinked, stunned. Married, kids. My son had a family, and I hadn't even known about it. The news hit me like a punch to the gut, but I kept my tone steady. Oh, I said, my voice flat. So you got married and have kids. How would I know? I was never informed about your wedding, let alone invited. Ethan sighed, and I could hear the defensiveness creeping into his voice. Dad, it's not like that. I wanted to tell you, but it's complicated. Complicated. I repeated, my voice rising. What's complicated about inviting your own father to your wedding? Or at least telling him you're getting married? Or that he's a grandfather? There was another pause. And then Ethan said the words that made my blood boil. If I invited you, it would have made Anthony upset. He's been like a father to me, Dad. I didn't want to cause any tension. I felt like I'd been slapped. So let me get this straight, I said, my voice low and dangerous. You didn't invite me to your wedding because it would have upset Anthony? The man who broke up our family? The man who stole your mother from me? That Anthony? Ethan didn't respond, and the silence only fueled my anger. Have some shame, Ethan, I snapped. I think I raised you better than this. But then again, you're also your mother's child. I guess selfishness must run in your blood. Dad, that's not fair, Ethan started. But I cut him off. Not fair, I barked. What's not fair is you cutting me out of your life and then expecting me to be okay with it. What's not fair is you choosing that man over me, the man who raised you, who was there for you from the day you were born. You want to talk about fair? Don't even get me started. There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and I could feel the weight of everything unsaid hanging between us. But I was done. I didn't have the energy for this. Not anymore. Congratulations on your family, I said finally, my voice cold. I hope they treat you better than you've treated me. And then I hung up. I sat there for a long time, staring at the phone in my hand, my chest heaving with emotion, anger, hurt, disappointment. It all swirled inside me, a toxic mix that I couldn't shake. My own son, my flesh and blood, had chosen Anthony over me. He'd chosen the man who destroyed our family over the man who built it. But as I sat there, the anger slowly gave way to something else, resignation. Ethan had made his choice, and so had Sophia. They made it clear where their loyalties lay, and it wasn't with me. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had to let it go. I had a new family now. My fighters, my gym, my team. They were my legacy, my future, and I wasn't about to let the past ruin that. 2 days after the call with Ethan, my phone rang again. This time it was Sophia, my daughter, the one who had once been my little girl, the one who used to look at me like I hung the moon. Now, she was just another reminder of the family I'd lost, the life that had been ripped away from me. I stared at her name on the screen, my finger hovering over the answer button. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to let it go to voicemail like I had with so many of her calls over the years. But another part of me, the part that still clung to hope, made me pick up. Sophia, I said, my voice flat, guarded. What do you want? There was a pause on the other end, like she was gathering her thoughts. Dad, she said finally, her voice soft but firm. I want to meet you. I think we need to talk. I leaned back in my chair, my jaw tightening. Talk about what? I asked, my tone clipped. What is there to talk about, Sophia? You have your life, and I have mine. You've made your choices, and I've made mine. What's wrong with that? I don't see anything that needs to be sorted. Sophia sighed, and I could hear the frustration creeping into her voice. Dad, stop it. Just stop. You can't keep acting like everything's fine. It's not. We're family, and we need to fix this. Fix what? I shot back, my voice rising. What exactly are we fixing, Sophia? The fact that you and your brother cut me out of your lives? The fact that you both sided with your mother and Anthony over me? The fact that you didn't even bother to tell me when you got married or had a kid? What exactly are we fixing here? There was a long silence, and then Sophia's voice came through, sharp and angry. You don't get it, do you? You don't get why we're upset. You broke this family, Dad. You're the reason Mom left. You're the reason everything fell apart. Her words hit me like a punch to the chest. But I didn't let it show. I broke the family? I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. Let me get this straight, Sophia. I'm the one who cheated? I'm the one who brought Anthony into our lives? I'm the one who chose money and a new life over the family I spent 26 years building? Is that what you're saying? You were never there, Dad. Sophia shouted, her voice breaking. You were always too busy with your wrestling, with your athletes, with everything but us. Mom was miserable, and you didn't even notice. You didn't care. I felt the surge of anger, but I forced myself to stay calm. Sophia, I don't have the energy for this, I said, my voice cold. I don't want you to call me again. I hope I'm making myself clear. Dad, wait, she started, but I didn't let her finish. Goodbye, Sophia. And then I hung up. Anger, hurt, disappointment. It all swirled inside me. A toxic mix that I couldn't shake. My own daughter, the little girl I'd once carried on my shoulders, had turned against me. She'd rewritten history in her mind, blaming me for everything that had gone wrong, absolving Denise and Anthony of any responsibility. Sophia had made her choice, just like Ethan. They'd chosen their mother. They'd chosen Anthony, and they'd chosen to cut me out of their lives. And as much as it hurt, I knew I had to let it go. I couldn't keep holding on to the hope that they'd come back, that they'd see the truth. It was time to move on. That evening, I blocked both their numbers. It wasn't out of anger or spite. It was out of self-preservation. I couldn't keep letting them reopen old wounds. I couldn't keep letting them drag me back into a past I was trying to leave behind. I had a new life now, and I wasn't about to let the ghosts of my old one ruin that. I wasn't born yesterday. When Ethan and Sophia suddenly started calling me out of the blue after years of silence, I knew something was up. People don't just change their hearts overnight, especially not when they've spent years blaming you for everything that went wrong in their lives. No, there had to be a reason, and I had a sinking feeling it had something to do with money. I decided to do some digging. There was a guy named Tony who used to train at our gym in the evenings. He worked as a mechanic at Anthony's dealership in Bridgeport, so I figured he might know something. One evening after training, I pulled him aside. Tony, I said, keeping my voice casual. You still work at Anthony's dealership, right? He nodded, wiping sweat off his forehead with a towel. Yeah, coach. Why? I hesitated for a moment, then decided to cut to the chase. I need to know if something's going on over there. Anything unusual. Tony raised an eyebrow, clearly picking up on the tension in my voice. Unusual how? I shrugged, trying to play it cool. I don't know. Financial trouble, maybe? Anything that might explain why my kids are suddenly crawling out of the woodwork. Tony's expression shifted. He glanced around, making sure no one was listening. Then he lowered his voice. Look, coach, he said. I probably shouldn't be telling you this, but yeah, there's trouble. Big trouble. Anthony's been messing around with the books for years. Tax evasion. Shady deals. You name it. I felt a cold satisfaction settle in my chest. And the IRS? I asked. They caught wind of it, Tony said. And now he's looking at some serious penalties. Either he pays up or he goes to jail. I leaned back, nodding slowly. And if he pays up? Tony shrugged. He'd have to sell the dealership. And even then, it might not be enough. The guy's in deep, coach. Real deep. I nodded, my mind racing. So that was it. Anthony was about to lose everything. And with him, Ethan and Sophia would lose their jobs. Ethan was the marketing officer. Sophia worked in accounts. Without Anthony's dealership, they'd be out of work, out of money, out of luck. And suddenly they remembered dear old Dad. Not because they missed me, not because they wanted to make things right, but because they needed my money. I thanked Tony and sent him on his way. Then I sat down on a bench, my thoughts swirling. It all made sense now. Ethan's call about his kids. Sophia's sudden desire to make things right. It wasn't about family. It was about survival. They were desperate, and they thought I was their lifeline. Well, they were wrong. I worked hard for what I have. I built my career from the ground up, fought tooth and nail to get where I am today. And I wasn't about to share it with the people who had betrayed me, who had chosen Anthony over me, who had cut me out of their lives without a second thought. They made their bed, and now they could lie in it. 2 days later, I was in my office, finishing up paperwork and reviewing the gym's upcoming schedule, when my phone buzzed. Brenda, the receptionist. She rarely ever called, unless it was something serious. I answered. "Hey Brenda, what's up?" Her voice was tense. "Logan, there's a bit of a situation out front." I sat up straight. "What kind of situation?" She hesitated. "Ethan and Sophia are here." My jaw tightened. They tried to walk in without checking in or signing anything. When I stopped them, they got upset. Really upset. They're threatening to get me fired. "I thought you should know." I stood up from my desk, my fists clenching. "I'll be right there." "Stay calm, Brenda. You did nothing wrong." As I walked toward the front desk, I could already hear their raised voices. Ethan, with his usual entitled demeanor, was leaning over the counter, pointing aggressively at Brenda. She stood her ground despite the clear intimidation. Sophia stood beside him, arms crossed, looking equally livid. "This is unacceptable," Ethan was saying loudly. "Do you even know who we are? My father owns this place. How dare you stop us?" Sophia chimed in, her voice dripping with disdain. "We'll make sure you're gone by the end of the day. People like you shouldn't even have jobs." Brenda caught my eye as I approached. Relief flickered across her face. "Here's Logan now," she said firmly. I stepped in between Brenda and my so-called family. "What's going on here?" Ethan straightened up, giving me a smug look. "Finally, your little gatekeeper here thinks she has the right to tell us we can't come in." I folded my arms. "That's her job, Ethan. Everyone checks in. No exceptions." Sophia scoffed. "Seriously? You're siding with her? We're your family. We don't need to check in." I kept my tone even. "Actually, you do. And threatening my staff? That's unacceptable. You need to leave." Ethan's face twisted with disbelief. "You're supporting this lowlife receptionist over your own flesh and blood? What's wrong with you, Dad?" That comment hit a nerve. My blood boiled, but I clenched my fists and took a slow breath. I wasn't going to lose control. "You heard me," I said, my voice steady but firm. "Leave, now, or I'll call the cops." Ethan stepped forward aggressively, his eyes burning with anger. Before he could say anything, one of the fighters training nearby, a light heavyweight named Andre, noticed the commotion. His eyes locked on Ethan, and he started moving toward us with unmistakable intent. I raised a hand, stopping Andre in his tracks. "I've got this," I told him quietly. Andre gave me a look but backed off, his muscles still tense. "Ready." Sophia's voice rose again. "You're pathetic, Dad. Always were. No wonder Mom said you'd never amount to anything." Ethan sneered. "Yeah, loser Dad, running a gym like it's some big achievement. Real impressive." They both turned toward the door, but not before hurling one last insult over their shoulders. "You'll regret this, Dad," Sophia shouted. "You are a loser, Dad," Ethan added. They stormed out. Brenda's voice broke the silence. "Are you okay?" I forced a smile. "I'm fine. Thanks for holding your ground, Brenda. You did good." She nodded, but I could see the concern in her eyes. The whole incident had been caught on security cameras. Before I returned to my office, I asked Brenda to make a copy of the footage and send it to me. I wanted to keep it on file just in case. 3 days later, I was back in my office when Brenda buzzed through again. Her voice was filled with disbelief. "Logan, they're back." I sighed, already feeling the headache coming on. "Send them to my office. Let's see what this is about." A few minutes later, Ethan and Sophia walked in. This time, they weren't alone. Each of them was holding a child's hand. Their kids. My grandchildren. The kids looked to be around 3 or 4 years old, their eyes wide as they took in the gym's atmosphere. Ethan had that same smug expression, but Sophia's face was carefully composed, like she had rehearsed this moment. They sat down across from me, the children standing awkwardly by their sides. Ethan was the first to speak. "Dad, we just wanted to come by and apologize for the misunderstanding last week." Sophia nodded, adopting a sympathetic tone. "We overreacted, and we're sorry. Truly." I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. "What do you want?" I asked bluntly. They exchanged glances before Sophia spoke up. "Dad, we think it's time you meet the kids. They should know who their grandfather is." I raised an eyebrow, my expression flat. "Really? So you've never told them who I am? And now, suddenly, you want me to believe you're here to introduce me to them?" I scoffed. "Cut the act, Sophia. Tell me what you really want." Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his seat, glancing at Sophia for support. She cleared her throat and said, "Dad, we're family. We just want to reconnect. That's all." I snorted, leaning forward and resting my elbows on the desk. "Cut the crap, Sophia. You didn't come here to reconnect. You came here because you need something. So spit it out." Ethan's face flushed, and he finally broke. "Fine. I have a plan for a used car dealership. I need investors, and I thought, maybe you could help." I leaned back again, a cold smile tugging at my lips. "Ah, there it is. The truth. So what happened? Your loving stepfather not helping you." Ethan looked down, his face red with embarrassment. "Anthony's going through some financial trouble right now. He can't help." I nodded slowly. "I see. So now you remember dear old Dad." I let out a short laugh, shaking my head. "Well, let me make this clear. I'm not investing in your dealership." I stood up, my voice low and firm. "You made your choices, Ethan. You and Sophia both. You chose Anthony over me. And now, you're going to have to live with that." "Dad, come on." I cut him off. "Now you may leave." Ethan's face twisted with anger, and he shot to his feet. "You're unbelievable. You're just going to sit here with all your money and let your own kids struggle? What kind of father are you?" I stood up too, my voice low and steady. "The kind of father who doesn't reward betrayal." I met his eyes, my tone ice cold. "You want money? Go ask Anthony. He's the one you chose." That's when Ethan lost it. He picked up a glass of water from my desk and hurled it at me. I dodged it easily, the glass shattering against the wall behind me. Before I could react, one of the fighters training outside the office burst in, his eyes wide. "Coach, you okay?" he asked, his voice tense. I raised a hand to calm him. "I'm fine." Within seconds, the office was filled with fighters, their faces hard, their eyes locked on Ethan. Mark, my star pupil, was standing right beside me. His presence alone was enough to make Ethan shrink back. I raised my hand, my voice calm but firm. "Stop. Everyone stop." The fighters froze, their eyes flicking to me for direction. I looked at Ethan and Sophia. Then I turned to the fighters. "Boys, this is my good-for-nothing, backstabbing son. I'm going to file for a restraining order against him. And the next time he tries to enter this gym," I smirked, "you're free to use him as a dummy for your training." The fighters smiled, stepping back and giving Ethan space. I turned back to him, my voice cold. "Get out, both of you, and don't come back." Ethan and Sophia didn't need to be told twice. They turned and left. The fighters parted, letting them through. As the door closed behind them, I sank back into my chair. I was done. For good. That same day, I got the video footage from the security cameras. Without wasting a second, I forwarded it to my lawyer. I wanted everything on record. The restraining orders were granted swiftly. Ethan and Sophia were no longer allowed near me, my property, or my life. They had crossed too many lines. And their latest stunt, trying to blackmail me using my own grandchildren, was the final nail in the coffin. I had enough. My decision was firm and absolute. That family was dead to me. I had no son, no daughter. The bond we once shared had been irreparably shattered. Cutting them out of my life was excruciating. But it was necessary. I'd endured enough betrayal for one lifetime. 5 days later, news broke that Anthony had been arrested. The authorities had seized all his assets. Every last penny, every piece of property. Ethan and Sophia were evicted from their lavish homes, because, as it turned out, Anthony owned them. They had nothing left. For a fleeting moment, I felt a pang of sorrow for my grandchildren. They were innocent in all this chaos. But I reminded myself, their parents' downfall was not my responsibility. I couldn't save everyone, and I certainly wasn't going to sacrifice my peace for people who had done nothing but betray me. Later that same day, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Denise's name. Part of me wanted to ignore it, but curiosity got the better of me. Maybe, just maybe, she had come to her senses. I picked up. "Hello." My voice was flat, emotionless. "Logan," Denise began, her tone pleading. "Listen, I know you're upset, but please, Ethan and Sophia need help. They have nowhere to go. The kids—" I cut her off. "Stop right there." My voice hardened. "They made their choices. They lied. They schemed. And they tried to blackmail me. And you think I'm going to swoop in and play savior? Logan, please," she persisted, desperation creeping into her voice. "They're still your children." "No, they're not." I said it coldly. "They stopped being my children the moment they decided to betray me. I'm done, Denise. Done." She started to say something else, but I didn't care to hear it. I hung up, and immediately blocked her number. 2 days later, I got the shocking news. Sophia had been arrested. The IRS uncovered her involvement in Anthony's tax evasion scheme. Turned out, she wasn't just a bystander. She had actively helped Anthony manipulate the accounts. When the authorities pieced everything together, it became clear that Sophia was one of the brains behind the entire operation. The consequences were immediate and brutal. Her husband filed for divorce the same day she was arrested. He took the kids and left without looking back. I couldn't imagine the devastation she must have felt. But then again, she had made her choices. Choices that led to this moment. As if that weren't enough chaos, Ethan's wife also filed for divorce. She packed up, left with both their kids, leaving Ethan to face the fallout alone. It was like karma had synchronized its watch and decided to visit them both at once. I'd be lying if I said there wasn't a part of me that found a grim satisfaction in seeing justice served. But I didn't dwell on it for long. I had bigger things to focus on. Mark's heavyweight championship fight was coming up, and I was determined to put every ounce of my energy into it. No distractions. Mark had been training like a man possessed, and I matched his intensity every step of the way. We worked through grueling sessions, refining his technique, building his stamina, sharpening his mental focus. This fight was everything, not just for Mark, but for all of us. 3 months of relentless preparation led us to fight night. The air was thick with anticipation. As we entered the arena, the crowd roared, a deafening symphony of excitement and nerves. Mark stood beside me, his face a mask of determination. "You ready for this?" I asked, leaning close so he could hear me over the noise. He nodded, his jaw set. "More than ever, coach. Let's do this." The bell rang, and from the first moment, Mark was a force of nature. His opponent barely had a chance to react before Mark took him down with a flawless first-round submission. Mark secured the victory, became the new heavyweight champion. The arena exploded into cheers. Mark fell to his knees, tears streaming down his face as the referee raised his hand in victory. The championship belt gleamed under the bright lights. During the post-fight interview, Mark was still emotional. He wiped his face with a trembling hand and spoke into the mic, his voice raw with gratitude. I want to thank Coach Logan Carter. He looked toward me. He believed in me when no one else did. He pushed me harder than I thought I could go. I owe all my success to him." The interviewer turned to me, curiosity and admiration in her eyes. "Logan, it seems like a lot of these fighters credit their success to you. What do you think makes you such a great mentor?" I took a moment to gather my thoughts, the noise of the crowd fading into the background. I smiled slightly. "I just give them direction," I said, keeping my voice steady. "They run hard. These boys, they're the best of the best. And mark my words, all the divisions will be ruled by our boys." And with that, my legacy was cemented. My past, dead and buried. And my future, it had never looked brighter.